Brexit trade deal, which has finally been agreed. So we want to take a look then at what happens next. Both sides now need to get any new deal ratified by their respective parliaments by the end of the year. And that's just in a week's time. There should then be no noticeable change to trade, with the UK keeping tariff-free access to the European single market. But a customs border will be erected between the mainland and Northern Ireland as part of a previous agreement to avoid a hard border on the island lasting 6 years. And freedom of movement will end, with the UK implementing a new points-based immigration system. Employers will be required to check that EU citizens are eligible to work or face penalties. Leon Emirali previously served as an aide to Britain's former Secretary of State for exiting the EU. Stephen Barclay is also a PR and communications advisor. Joins us now from Hitchin by Skype. And so, as we were saying, that this deal smooths the way for UK and European companies to have access to each other's markets in a way that is more favourable than those World Trade Organization rules. But when you look at what's been agreed here, where do you think it might fall short? What are the flaws?
Well, look, it's really interesting, Mariam, because what we've got here is possibly the first trade deal in history where we've started with free trade and we've moved to an end point where there's more barriers than there were to begin with. So it isn't going to be a perfect deal. Quite clearly, there will have been compromise on both sides. But I think that whether you're Boris Johnson tonight or whether you're Ursula von der Leyen, I think you'll be pretty chuffed that you've been able to deliver a big deal in record time and a very complex deal. So obviously those key areas like fishing, where there may have been some compromises, those key areas about level playing field as well. But on the whole, we need to see the legal text before we can decide where the losers and winners will be.
Right. So then how is this going to change the relationship? I mean, one thing that has been predicted, obviously, is that the UK is going to suffer a fall in GDP.
Yeah, so I think the predictions were that without a deal, we'd be looking at potentially losing 6% of GDP. With a deal of this nature, we're looking at only losing 4% of GDP. So, we are still looking at a potential loss scenario here. And in particular, looking at the fishing industry, which has been the contentious point, that's worth around 0.1% of the UK's overall economy. So there was never really going to be any doubt that fishing was going to be the thing that broke this deal. But I think it's one of those contributions that allows us to avoid a cliff edge Brexit, avoid that disorderly Brexit, and potentially build on this over the coming years to build a close arrangement between the UK and the European Union. And of course, the opportunity for the UK now is to go out and get those trade deals with the likes of the USA and other nations where we haven't been able to trade with before. And if that happens, then potentially things could be looking good. But as you say, those figures, regardless, will result in a loss of UK GDP.
And very difficult to say how this is going to play out in years to come, isn't it? Obviously, the country was divided on this issue, but there was a vote, a referendum in 2016, and this was the result. When you speak about a process of rebuilding ties and perhaps a closer relationship, could it ever be reversed? Could you ever see a sort of political context or situation in which Britain tries to rejoin the bloc?
It's a really interesting question, and I think that depending on the outlook of how this first initial phase of Brexit goes, if it goes well, then obviously I think that perhaps sets a blueprint for other EU member states to look at Britain and say, it worked well for them, why don't we go it alone? If it goes poorly and Britain's economy suffers in a significant way, then quite clearly there may be a discussion for the UK in 10, 15 years' time to say, hang on a minute, why don't we think about having closer ties with the European Union? But I think until then, because it has been such an emotive, difficult issue for the United Kingdom, I think a lot of people are going to be eating their turkey tomorrow, feeling relieved that we can hopefully draw a line under Brexit and look forward to a brighter future, albeit with the outlook of the pandemic amongst us.
Thank you very much, Leon Emirali, joining us there.